I'll start.
All right, now we're ready.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. It is Tuesday, March the 23rd, approximately 7:02, and this council is conducting its meeting via Zoom. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Carl.
Here.
Councilmember Waldman.
Here.
Councilmember Weil.
Here.
Chairman Clark.
Here.
Mayor.
Here. Next item, please.
Item number 2, communications. Hold on one second.
Yes.
Okay, Mayor, we have no written communications this evening.
Thank you. Next item, please.
Item number 3, city managers report and staff reports.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. I'm gonna start. Basically, I'm just going to talk a little bit about, took a couple of items from each of the department reports, just to bring them forward, to make sure folks have seen them and to encourage people to go look at those staff reports. This is about the Community Mental Health Liaison Program. The police department has been working with behavioral health responses. And a lot of this information came from when Chief Wolf started his community resource team. And that's just a group of folks from different sectors who've come and kind of get together periodically, and they kind of talk about policing issues. And one of the topics was police response to mental health consumers. And every officer on the Olivet force is a critical incident, has critical incident training, or CIT, and a lot of the departments around here do. What we discovered, though, and what we know is that we really need that mental health professional for a variety of things. We need them both for acute and chronic situations. And what they've done is they've teamed up, and now we have, they really like their acronyms. We have a community mental health liaison, or CMHL, which rolls off the tongue, who goes with a police officer to different folks that have been identified in the community, just who may need a little assistance, or just somebody that they can keep track. These people are also available when we have an acute situation, something that happens, a crisis situation. We can call, and they're 24/7. And so, but I think kind of what helps is once we know someone is in crisis doesn't tend to come suddenly and then leave suddenly. It tends to stay. And so I'm very happy with kind of what the police have started here, and we hope we'll be expanding on that. Another interesting story from our parks and recreation department are the story walks in our parks. And for some, I had trouble getting a picture in here. There's actually a picture. It's The Snowy Day, the book. If you have kids, you probably have read it. And you walk the path, and there's illustrated panels as you walk. And it's just a great way to, walk with your young kids or your old kids, and kind of read this book as you're walking. A new story will be out in April, and we're hoping to kind of rotate them through the different parks. The planning department also has a number of updates in theirs. This is this is where you can get information kind of really early on what's going on in the planning department. The planning director, Carlos Trejo, puts out what staff is working on. So you'll see the stormwater management plan that staff is working on with the planning commission. He talks about the strategic plan or the comprehensive plan update. and also some of the zoning ordinances that are going to be up for discussion or are being discussed at the planning commission level. And then, you know, he ends with the giving some idea of the petition plans that are for review at the submitted to the planning commission. So I think there's a lot of good information in these reports, and I hope people really take the opportunity to read through them. Talked about this last time, but it's still, we have youth camps open for enrollment. We have 3 different types, and so I think there's a lot to choose from. And I know people are eager to try to get back to kind of a normal life. We'll be kind of quasi-normal, we'll still be masked. And we're at this point, we're still having smaller group sizes. We're waiting for a better or some updated information from the county. But we're looking forward to having camp back. And upcoming, we have a council retreat, which is essentially a work session tomorrow at 4 p.m., 4 to 9. We have the Tax Increment Financing Commission, or the TIF Commission. We'll be meeting on March 29th at 7 p.m. That meeting will be via Zoom. The Planning and Community Design Commission is April 1st, 7 p.m. And the next City Council work session is April 6th. And then that next week on April 13th, we have our first regular meeting. The Tax Increment Financing Commission, because there's documentation that may take some time for folks to read through. That's been up on as an agenda now I put that up last week. I put up, and then I recently updated it with a draft resolution. So there's a lot of information out there for that people who are interested that they can read up on that. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions that the council might have.
Are there any questions for the city manager? No? All right, then let's move on. Next item, please.
Item number 4, city council reports.
I'll start with Council Member Carl.
I knew that. I already unmuted. So anyway, not that I have much to say. I attended an Economic Development Commission meeting on March 10th. However, the majority of that was in closed session, so I have nothing to report here. I suspect there may be a closed session update for the council later tonight, but I don't know that for sure. Thank you.
I'm just going to break for a minute with going around, because I think it's important for attendees who don't necessarily are not familiar with our jargon as far as what we mean by closed session and why we close sessions. So if the council will indulge me a moment so that we can do a little education here, because I think that's always important to inform the public. Mr. Martin, would you briefly explain why Mr. Carr can't give us a report in public? Not the nature of obviously what he had to say, but what is it that allows a board or a commission or the council to go to closed session?
Sure. Let's start with the basic premise behind the Sunshine Law, which is governmental transparency whenever possible. And that's the goal of the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law also includes several exceptions to that transparency requirement when discussions, governmental discussions are necessary or appropriate, exactly for the reason that public disclosure could compromise something, whatever it may be. And there's a long list of exceptions that apply to cities and school districts and pretty much all governmental units. With cities, the primary issues that are at stake are the attorney-client communications depending on legal issues or pending legal issues or possible legal issues. Number 2, discussions of personnel when the merits or demerits of a particular employee are discussed, and property issues, meaning the sale, lease, sale or lease of city real estate. That's on either end. And also contract issues where contracts are being negotiated. Those are the primary exceptions for cities. And obviously, when you're talking, especially when you're talking about the sale or lease of property where the value of property can become public, it could compromise the buyer's or seller's position very easily. And with contract negotiations, it's pretty much the same thing. Things that are discussed during contract negotiations can compromise the people who are engaging in the discussion, and that discourages open communication between the government and a possible vendor, and it could interfere with the ability to negotiate a contract and to enter into a contract if people have to worry about sensitive information getting out in the public.
Okay, I just wanted, because we say that word closed session a lot. And I know that from time to time, we may have new people joining us and they may not know what it means. And I think it's important to educate as we go along so that people don't think that it means some sort of nefarious thing. It doesn't. We do have that right to do that. And we exercise that right when it is appropriate for us to do that. So having said that, that makes Mr. Carl's conversation, gives it a lot more context. So I will ask Councilmember Wild if she has anything to report.
I attended a Parks and Recreation meeting. It was a lengthy meeting, and there was a lot of material covered. This week, actually, with Ladue being on spring break, we are having a spring break camp. They filled, I believe, 28 out of 35 spots, or maybe there's only 4 spots, but as of a week ago, that's where they were. They're doing Circus Kaput this week, which is a camp that we hire them to come in and do the program for us. We're following all the protocol for COVID that we followed during last summer's programs as well. For the baseball program, we're partnering this year and with this program. That means we're 3 weeks inside and 3 weeks outside. But by having this indoor facility, what it allows us is that fewer games will be canceled, but also it allows more focus on skill building, training, and good batting practices, because there are batting cages there. And that's with Brentwood, I believe. The playground operations on April 15th, the bathrooms will be open like they were last summer. And we talked about the protocol for playground sanitization, how often they're going to be doing that. And I don't know if it was resolved, but I believe, and Barbara can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're looking at once every 2 weeks or once a month. That was what it was down to then the final decision was going to be made, I believe, on a higher level, but the commission weighed in on that. During the summer, there will be different camps, and some of them it'll be the regular Camp O for Olivet, and then there'll also be some other camps that are more specific, like the Challenger Camp and camps that people can sign up that are special. We also had a visit with Brian, and I hope I say this right, Brian Azcona. And Brian is the horticulturist for Olivet. It was actually one of his anniversaries of being there. And he talked about his involvement with Prop C, with the improvements in the communication with the arborists for the parks and what we're going to be doing. But he also went through the different parks and some of the trees and the perennials and what has been going on with some of the plant care. And it was a very informative time with him for all the commission members. And we have, our commission is diverse, so that we have people that know native plants, and that also was a good discussion. We talked about the park master plan, the implementation, and it was basically a review from the meeting that we had our last meeting, when they came and visited with us, we talked about the concept plans, the playground RFP process, the timeline update, which is on the website and will be running parallel. The budget decision that was made at our last meeting about not specifying the money for Prop C, but having it open to the entire Prop C instead of to specific parts of the project. And then we also spent a nice amount of time. Our new chair, Jim Persons, is working very hard to get our annual work plan up and going. And they've asked every member of the commission to take on responsibility outside of the commission time to meet in small groups to do some of the planning. So we spent time getting an update on where everyone was with their work and what their committees are doing. Future items include annual work plan, a memorial policy, and the park master plan implementation is just ongoing. Upcoming events: last Saturday, we had, for the first day of spring, we had Weed Warriors, and they had a fabulous turnout on a gorgeous day. And I already said we have spring break camp going on this week, but also April 10th will be the Olivet and Bloom annual kickoff. And then April 17th, we'll have Weed Warriors once again. So as you can see, the Parks and Recreation Commission is very busy. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Waldman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councilmember Weil, your board sounds very busy. So before I get started, kind of sounds like I would be interested in hearing the conversation. Has that been put online for me to look at? I guess that's a question to the city manager.
We do record our meetings.
I don't know if it's been placed up there yet or not.
All right, let me know when it has. I'd like to listen to that. Sounds like there was a lot of good conversation, and I need to get just more aware of it. Mr. Trejo does a very good job. We have the Planning Community Design Commission that was on March 18th, 7:00 p.m. He does a wonderful job providing summary to everybody. So I'll keep it short and brief. The most important thing that I want to put out there is that Birdie Lane subdivision is scheduled to.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Birdie Lane subdivision is scheduled to have a public hearing April 15th at the city council level. And if I could make a comment with regard to the Planning Community Design Commission that the city manager had on the schedule, I believe I've received something from Mr. Trejo that April 1st meeting will not take place. So it's my understanding there will not be a PCDC meeting on April 1st. And those are the two most important things I think need to be brought up from that meeting on the 18th of March. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for anyone before I move on? I did not attend any meetings. I will be running the Municipal League General Meeting on Thursday night. So if you all don't have anything better to do, you certainly are welcome to attend. And I know that Pat Kelly will be discussing all of the legislative issues that are going on at Jeff City, and he will bring us up to date because he is out there all the time for us. So that is all I have right now.
I did go to it was a workshop for disadvantaged youth in St. Louis City.
I'm sorry, City, that's my bad.
That's okay. I went to a workshop for disadvantaged youth in St. Louis City last week, and the city of Olivet came up once people found out my position for the city of Olivet, and everyone just wanted to ask, what are we doing in that city that so much development is going on? They were just blown away, and they just assumed maybe we got purchased by Amazon or something because of all the new things that are happening. I said, no, we just have a city of people that want change to happen, and I've got an awesome city council to work with. And I was quite proud, and I just wanted to share that information with you guys.
Well, you could always tell them what we used to believe about Creve Coeur is that they had seeds and they planted them at night and they watered them. And in the morning, you woke up and there was a building. Don't know how it happened, just did. It doesn't happen like that. It takes a lot of planning and a lot of hard work. All right, with that, we will move on to the next item.
Item number 5, monthly finance report, February 2021.
Mr. Mann,
Good evening, everybody.
good evening.
Well, tonight we have our fiscal year to the end of February in front of us, and not a lot of new items to report. We do have revenues. They did slide a little further behind and ended 96,500 below our expectations, and then on the expenditure side also below expectations at 219,000, and that ends at a net favorable balance of 122,700. About where we were last month when we talked about this. And they are the sales tax revenue again. We've kind of monitored this closely. Was the main story I think for this month again. All those other revenue categories, which would be our property taxes and our utility taxes, for the most part, they were fairly stable compared with what our year-long trajectories have looked like. And then on the expenditure side, we also remain within those expectations. And this is all kind of considering those pandemic-related, like operational limitations that we've talked about over the last couple months. I'll mention, them here again in a little bit. Our dashboard, as we look at it there, nothing jumping out as out of whack or anything of mention there. And then on the next page, we'll see our reserve policy, and we're showing really strong compliance there yet again. And again, we're at 50% of this year FY 21 expenditure budget is our reserve policy goal. And then when we look at our FY 22 budget, when we look at that, we'll be looking at a goal of 75% of expenditures on that 5th year out. So that's when it really that reserve policy really comes into play for us, luckily. From there, the revenues individually are kind of narrowing down a little bit. The collections are showing some tempering after some record months early in our fiscal year. Despite those slower collections, the sales tax category does remain above those expectations, but again, kind of sliding backwards. And with that remaining above expectations, it kind of does and has through the whole year propped up these other revenue categories. Property taxes, again, like last month, not much happening there. We did see maybe a little bit slower processing, and it's one of the highest monthly collections we saw in any given February. And again, I think it's probably just the time to process some of those things at the county level. The other thing that helped in the property tax category is that the Elmwood fire protection invoices, they've been up to date. They are up to date now for the first time since November, so it's over several months, and that's good news. I think there was some turnover at the county that the invoices weren't getting to where they needed to go. We've rectified that, and hopefully that will remain at our expectations on those quarterly payments through the rest of the year. Utility tax collections remain right at those expectations, and then the remaining categories, which involves a lot of the other kind of miscellaneous revenue sources we have, are they're mixed. Nothing to really speak of other than, again, the Parks and Rec revenues are notably struggling due to those pandemic-related restrictions. Those revenues are offset with lower costs, and that's a little bit unlike most of our other revenues that we generate for the city. And then I'll give our cautionary reminder that most of the budgeting that was completed last year for our FY 21 that we're in right now did not have much softness or any kind of we had budgeted for pretty much a full recovery from the pandemic. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. We were worried after after January and February. We'll see the chart on the next page here in a second that maybe we'll get a sneak peek into March that maybe things are okay. And so yeah, when you look at there, that orange line there, the great big hump there in September, then we come around and we saw some of the two lowest ones there in January, February. But now if we give our sneak peek into March, you can see that we're our third highest March ever, which would go into a little bit of it would suggest maybe some timing of just processing slowdowns at the state level. Now, I'm not sure if that's the case or not. We'll have to wait and see for next month. And that's what I've said for the last several months, but at least now it's not all bad news 3 months in a row. Now, when we talk about this stuff, as far as revenues overall go, we don't, our reporting doesn't tell us how much lower the revenues were from last year. And that is a big discussion point as of late of what, how much lower is it. And it usually doesn't come into play very much. It is, we have our budgets for our expenditures and we have revenues to pay for those things. And as long as those things kind of match up, we don't have much to talk about. But again, those our revenues are lower than they were last year. And that's probably no surprise to many people on the sales tax front and the Parks and Rec, but courts, permits not so much in itself. Our business licenses are expected to be quite a bit lower. So those are things that are, they weigh on us, and as we approach our next budgeting time, it becomes more important to kind of realize where we're at as far as an economic cycle or recovery would go. On the expenditure side, the final point I'd make is that despite that large variance of over $200,000, $134,000 of that is for the community center and recreation department. And again, that's just because we weren't able to offer the programs so we didn't have the revenue, we also don't have the expenditures. Outside of that, there's nothing there that points to anything to bring up, and they remain within fairly reasonable amount of expectations of where I thought they would be. With that, I'll open up to any questions, and thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Mann? I'm assuming that when we are notified about how much of an award we're given from this $1.9 trillion let's mortgage my grandkids' future fund thing that they did, that we're going to all talk about that. I know that that's something that we had, kind of talked about, but I'm more curious when it does arrive. Is your expectation, Mr. Mann, that it's going to have its own little fund so we can monitor it?
I would expect that to happen, and we do have a fund similar for those kind of purposes, and that's in that grants fund. Now, this is a kind of a special situation, I think, and so I would equate that almost to a capital project like building the city center or the community center and parks improvements that we have now, where there's almost sub-reporting that happens inside of that. I wouldn't get too caught up in the actual funds themselves to track these kinds of things, but we can do our own reporting. And inside of that, I think it gives us more flexibility. We can provide exactly what you or the public or whoever would like to see to satisfy what that means. One of the things for sure is we're waiting on. It's still fairly new law, and we're waiting on guidance on what some of the definitions and that. As always, what are the terms? What does this actually mean? And so, yep, that'll guide a lot of that conversation.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Item number 6, hearing from citizens.
Okay, this is an opportunity for the audience to address the council. I'm just going to go over the rules really quickly again. I ask that if you'd like to come over and speak to us by video, that you please state your name and address for the record, that you keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. I don't know who is in our audience right now. I know that we have many people running for different offices at this time. It is the council's policy that there's no electioneering and no campaigning. So if there is anyone that would like to address the council, kindly raise your hand, and Ms. Sondag will bring you over and then probably send me back. You're never, ever living that down. Ever.
Mayor,
I don't see anybody.
hands.
Okay, All right, then we are going to,
Mayor, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Oh.
I have something that someone submitted in writing to be read at this time.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is to the council from Leslie Ricard and Greg Evans regarding updated bamboo draft. We have had bamboo in our yard for more than 20 years and continue to successfully manage it. We have enjoyed it as a beautiful year-round natural barrier, one also used as a resting place for birds. It has also given us much needed privacy, and due to the root structure, it is a great absorbent of water, preventing erosion, particularly on a hillside. Privacy and erosion issues continue to be of significant importance. We don't believe bamboo should be singled out for the prohibitions outlined in the draft of the new urban agriculture ordinances bamboo section. Two other key points to consider. When privacy and our topography between properties are issues, a fence isn't always the reasonable solution, especially when a fence would require a variance involving a substantial height difference. Bamboo in particular can be the most agriculturally friendly as well as attractive solution. Residents have different landscape aesthetics, and there shouldn't be a preference through the use of an ordinance for one type over another. Comments specific to the draft. 1, it is unnecessary to prohibit the planting of bamboo so long as the resident adheres to the parameters of managing it through an application process and registration, one that might also include a one-time application fee. If bamboo is planted without an application being made first, the city will contact the homeowner. If guidelines are not met, fines will be imposed. If guidelines are still not met, bamboo must be removed at the homeowner's expense. Number 2, a neighboring property owner should not have the right to determine what is planted on the homeowner's property, particularly pre-existing plants. Plants, trees, and vines naturally encroach on properties. Sweet gumballs are an example of a problem and one that easily causes injury and harm. Other ordinances state that tree and/or vine branches that lean over into a neighbor's property become that neighbor's task, both in terms of labor and cost, if it is an issue for the neighbor. Paragraph numbers 2B and C in section 445.080 of the revised draft could lead to unintended issues for the neighbors in the city. This section indicates that I would have the right to say my neighbor must cut down their gumball tree since I was recently injured due to the gumballs on my property. Number 3, section 445.080, numbers 2 and 3 only consider complaints made by a neighbor, not the rights of a homeowner. Equal protections must also be given to the homeowner. Sometimes a complaint is made because of an underlying agenda, which then can create an escalating situation for the residents involved, as well as for the city. Number 4, bamboo section number 3, as well as the administrative enforcement and violations and penalty sections, don't take into account the severity of an encroachment. As noted earlier, plants, trees, vines, etc., do have the possibility of encroachment. A minor encroachment, particularly one that doesn't damage a neighboring structure, should be addressed by the neighbor. A substantial encroachment should be dealt with as described earlier. Number 5, it is critical that these new ordinances not favor a neighbor over a property owner and vice versa. We would be happy to invite members of the committee for a field trip to our house for further discussion before any final decisions are made. We have been in touch with Carlos Trejo in order to ask for his guidance during this process. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. All right. We will move on to the next item then. Thank you.
Item number 7, document destruction request, March 2021.
I think this is Darren.
Good evening, everyone, once again. This is a little bit of house cleaning as we go through and clean out some other older records of the city. We haven't had the need for much of this as we since we moved into the city center, but we do have records that are off-site that do take up space that we could use for other things. So in going through this, we have unearthed some older stuff. Some of the stuff was intentionally kept the last time we had went through. Other stuff, man, the deeper you get sometimes, the more you find. You can see there are some receipt books from 1996. Imagine what everybody was doing in 1996. But the pretty good record. It's very interesting what you go through and what you can find. Remember when you used to get canceled checks back? Well, we have a lot of them. So yeah, I'm more than happy to answer anything here. These again in ordinance 2552 several years ago now is how we adopted those classifications are from the Secretary of State of Missouri's office of how we classify these things under that same kind of records retention, and this is how you would classify them, and that's how we classify these. And under those things and under that, we're asking to have those destroyed. We'll say that there's one there with a question mark onto that, and that's because the picture that I took of it, I did not get the beginning check number, but it's a box, and it's box marked from 02 to 03. That's all we include with that.
Okay.
So,
Are there any questions for Mr. Mann?
I do. It's not really with regard to the request you're doing now, but as I learned, and as you so noted, we have less paper because we're going electronically on things. Will you, when we are literally electronic, will you be coming back to say, can we destroy electronic history documents? Is that where we're going down the road, is to eventually just be doing electronic destruction of documents?
that's a really good question. But yeah, and so the electronic storage, just like in the places, I guess, when we went through this, is the answer is yes. But have we ever met to that point? No. And I think, Barbara, are you going to say something there?
We'd follow the same process. We follow the state's requirement for record retention. So when the state would start, we would still follow their, I would assume at some point when electronic records or as electronic records are seen as official documents, they will update those statutes. But really until then, not really. Yeah, because we have to follow them. So we have to follow the states.
May I say one thing on this issue too?
Yes.
And that would only be that obviously the huge difference between written and electronic records is that we can continue to store electronic records so much more cheaply than written records.
Right.
Based on space for pennies, probably. The question is, were these destructions really because of the hassle of maintaining these records, or is there a real reason to destroy them? It doesn't need to be answered now. I'm just throwing that out there as the question. So.
I would just say that these are kept down at Public Works, so it really wasn't it was more of a hassle for Darren to go down and get them. Bruce, on the other hand, found them to be a hassle, so I guess that's a good question.
What does it cost? Costs don't always have dollars.
Right.
Bruce was really appreciative.
Right.
He asked, and I went down there. It's good housekeeping.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that only keep what you need to keep. When their expiration is up, it's time to get rid of them, because I was there when we moved from one place to the other and watched all that clean out happen. And that was nuts. That was a nightmare. That was really a lot of paperwork that had been there for a lot of time. So
I will say too that in going through those records, the last time that happened was in 2001 when they remodeled City Hall. So I won't imagine what happened in 2001.
right.
That
So,
cleanup effort was probably pretty
right.
good. And some of you were there.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer. Get rid of it. Shred it. Let it go. All right. If there's no other comments or questions, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion to approve the destruction of documents described for retention classification adopted with ordinance 2552.
I'll second that.
Been moved and seconded. Any final thoughts or comments? Hearing none, please poll the council.
Councilmember Weil,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldman,
Yes.
Chairman Clark,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. Next item.
Item number 8, resolution number 2021-205, a resolution to amend the 2019 owner representative agreement between the City of Olivet and Navigate Building Solutions by expanding the scope of services to include pre-construction, construction, and post-construction services for the portion of the Centennial Greenway within Morrison Park at a sum not to exceed $122,133.
You folks conjured up Public Works Director Bruce McGregor. He's here.
Magical.
And we may keep Ruth in the process.
Still early. Bruce, you want to go ahead and take this? Up, you're on mute. Sorry.
Good evening, everybody. Bruce McGregor, Olivet Public Works Director, Mayor, council members. It's nice to see everybody again. Was that the correct description I overheard for this agenda item? I thought I overheard navigate.
Was that
buildings.
the wrong one?
Yeah, we're doing navigate. We're not doing the milling and paving, but hey, Bruce can talk about whatever he wants.
Oh,
to
I'm
talk
sorry.
about.
I apologize. I uploaded that, I uploaded his cover sheet as I said I would, and I must have put things out of order. I apologize for that.
No.
So Bruce, if you can just hang on for a second.
I am absolutely glad to, and it's my fault. I was late with the post with the item and did not. So anyway, I'll be right here.
All right. Again, my apologies to the council. Yes, what you have before you is a resolution to basically to expand the scope of services with Navigate Building Solutions. And what we'd be asking you, the reason for this is the Centennial Greenway within Warson Park. When you pass or approve the cooperative agreement ordinance 2715, that had called for the hiring of a construction manager for pre-construction, construction, and post-construction work. And I believe the council, we've talked about this before. The whole idea of that cooperative agreement was so that we can coordinate the work that's occurring in Warson Park in our project, the community center and the park improvements, with the Greenway, so that we don't have two contractors out there. We don't have two project managers out there. We don't have two, program managers out there. And so this is the result of that. Navigate Building Solutions. You saw the resolution has their costs in there, a sum not to exceed. Great Rivers Greenway has also reviewed those. They've reviewed the scope. They're on board with that. And so what will happen now is when Navigate Building Solutions is doing work on this project for the Greenway, it will get billed as such. Otherwise, it will be billed for the Prop C work. This is really no different from a Cochrane Engineering, who's done work on Dealman Phase 1 and Dealman Phase 2, and we'll get a bill and it identifies Phase 1 or Phase 2 because those are two different funding sources. What will then, once we get that bill, we have so many days to pay the bill, and at the same time, we will send GRG a request for reimbursement, and they will then reimburse us the funds. So in a lot of ways, this works kind of like our MoDOT or STP grants. When we get a bill turned in to us, we pay that contractor. We pay Spencer Contracting. We then submit for reimbursements from the state, and they give us the reimbursement. So I think this will work really well. Also, the way the Navigate is proposing has proposed the payment method. It's a flat rate over the months, and so I think that will also make this an easier process. And so if you have any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer any of the questions that you might have.
Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
All right, go ahead.
Barb, if you could just remind us and the public where the money will be coming from before we get reimbursed, please.
Where the money would be coming from before we get reimbursed, the city's general fund.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I think the fact that, Navigate is going to be involved in this in this aspect is just great. I mean, they are such a delight to work for. I cannot speak more highly of them. They are really the consummate professionals, and it's so easy, whether it was Katie or Todd or any of them. They're just so great. So it's good that they're going to be on board. I'm happy about that. I think the product that we're going to get is going to be amazing. So I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that the council approve resolution 2021-205, a resolution to amend the 2019 owner representative agreement between the city of Olivet and Navigate Building Solutions by expanding the scope of services to include pre-construction, construction, and post-construction service for a portion of the Centennial Greenway within Warson Park at a sum not to exceed $122,133.
I second the motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any final thoughts or questions? Hearing none, please poll the council.
Councilmember Weil,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldman,
I'm at the point of needing my vote. I couldn't hear.
yes.
Yes.
Yes, I will vote yes.
Chairman Clark,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Next item.
Item number 9, approval of amended contract with St. Louis Milling and Paving for Cherry Tree Lane.
Hello, Mr. McGregor.
Good evening, everybody. I'm glad to be back. So we know about the stormwater improvement project going on between the St. Louis County or St. Louis City property where our recreational trail is and the existing MSD stormwater infrastructure at Crabapple Court. I know we've been bringing you up to date, during status reports and so on. And just to refresh you on the project, the gap between those areas was never an official or a properly designed MSD stormwater set of structures, okay? It was an ad hoc collection of pipes that ran in front yards and was never really put together to carry the stormwater flow that was picked up upstream along Crabapple Court all the way up to Olive Boulevard. So MSD, we had actually been asking them for quite a number of years, going back to probably 2012, 13, and more history before that, has installed these new stormwater conduit structures and so on between the recreational trail at St. Louis City right away and Crabapple Court. And the piping and structures are done. So now it's time for pavement restoration. And if you'll recall, we have worked in the past with utility contractors trying to leverage their having a paving contractor on site to do more associated work while they're there. Most recently, we did that on Price Road when Missouri American Water replaced the main between the substation and Olive Boulevard. And we added on to get a full lane paved in that area rather just than the required strip. So we attempted to do that again with Kelp Contracting. Their staff has done a good job working with residents and constructing the sewers. Their subcontractor is a bit more pricey than we would normally accept. I don't really know why the pricing came out, but it's a little more than 50% more than contractors we work with, and I just don't see that I just don't see an advantage using this contractor for this price to do the associated work, especially since we've never had them paved for us before in town. So what we're asking for is additional paving beyond what is required in the MSD scope of work, which is one lane where they constructed the new sewers, and a bit in the adjacent areas where structures went in on the opposite side of the street, so that we can have new asphalt on both sides all the way up and down the street. So our contractor, STL Milling and Paving, gave the second estimate, and we already have an existing agreement with them as on-call paving. Okay, so they've said that they would, this is a little different than how we envisioned using on-call paving, but it still fits within the description we used in the documents for procuring those services. One of the things that I do want to bring up with this is I am confident that we are gonna, with these new stormwater structures and pipes, we will take care of, or most of the stormwater problems will be alleviated, okay? I think what really contributed to a lot of the problems on the street was all of that flow coming from Olive and Crabapple and everything upstream and not being able to flow down the street. But there will still be some stormwater issues on site that are contributed either from front yards, driveways, or the existing pavement that we may need to come back to and revisit. Okay, Cherry Tree Lane is one of the few streets in our city inventory that does not have a concrete curb and gutter to convey water to curb inlets or area inlets to receive the water into the piping system. Until we get the paving restored, it's going to be a little hard to really tell how this is all going to work. So I'll be actively monitoring the area, and when we get rainstorms and trying to observe how everything is working on site. Sort of a lengthy description, just related to an asphalt paving project, and I'd be glad to answer any questions anybody might have about this.
Are there any questions?
I do.
Mhm.
Go ahead.
So does this include, so it's Cherry Tree Lane, but does it also then include when it gets up to Angle at the top there where they are still working around the entrance to Crabapple Court?
We are not asking for additional paving at Crabapple Court or Angle, only what is included and required by our utility trench guide restoration guide. So we have a document that describes what needs to be done to restore pavement after a trench type utility installation. But for this project right here, we are specifically talking about additional paving on Cherry Tree Lane, because that is the most disturbed area, related to this project.
Are they two separate projects?
Well, the stormwater pipes begin all the way down on the south side of the trail, and they
Right.
continue across Angle, up, north across Cherry Tree, across Angle, and into Crabapple Court is where they made the final connections to the existing MSD structures, upstream of Cherry Tree. Am I doing okay explaining that? But for the paving restoration, we are not asking for anything additional beyond Cherry Tree North.
Okay, so I understand that, but what my question, I guess, is, did they include in the process or in the bid or whatever, the project, did they include restoring Crabapple Court?
Yes, they
Okay.
are required. Any trench or disturbed area is required to be restored we have a guide that describes all this. What they are not required to do is anything beyond their disturbed area. So if they disturbed the eastbound lane where they constructed the new sewers, that is all they're going to restore. They are not going to pay to repave the opposite side of the street, the undisturbed side of the street.
I understand that. So that leads me to one more question. Can I keep going, Mayor?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
My other question then is, they have totally destroyed or disturbed, as you used, the path,
Yes.
the walking path or bicycle path at the end of Cherry Tree Lane. Are they going to level that out? Because right now I think it's hazardous.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, one thing to note for sure, our residents have really taken a big inconvenience the construction season to build this, and you know, totally understand you know, their positions on this and appreciate everybody's patience and understanding. We are in contact with Kelp Contracting practically every day, pushing for them to get us the restoration schedule and to make everything improved. And they will absolutely redo the area of the trail and change the profile.
Great.
I have had a brief discussion with the Parks Director about changing the alignment a little bit of the trail in that area, which wouldn't be included, but we haven't made a final decision on that. But MSD, the contractor, is required to restore the trail. And if we don't get a decent schedule soon, I will, you know, absolutely request and make it known to all persons that they need to get something done immediately.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I do.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. McGregor, I just want to make sure that I'm, first of all, understanding this correctly. MSD is going to be repaving the east side where the construction was, and we are paying for the paving on the west side so that the entire street gets repaved. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? It's
And
clear.
I can pull, I have the GIS map up too, if you wanted me to show the existing pipes and things like that, if it helps anybody.
Sure, go ahead. Are you gonna pull? Okay, good.
Sorry, it took me a minute to click
That's
over.
okay.
So
That's okay.
let me turn, I'm going to turn off the sanitary layers here and the manholes. So, and let me turn off water mains as well. Okay, so when we're looking at the aerial map here, and I can turn that off here to make it a little more easier to see, everything in green is a City of Olivet roadway or pavement, something that we're required for. If I zoom out just a little bit further, you can see we have red streets over here that is a private subdivision. So that's our delineation between the jurisdiction of the streets. The ad hoc network that existed before this project were these blue lines on either side of the street. And back when this area was developed in the 40s, late 40s, early 50s, it was originally just a ditch in the front yards that went down along the side of the street that slowly got infilled with different kinds of pipe and so on. And then over time, somehow this subdivision got built, and all this network, these pipes coming from here up to Olive, are all connected to these two conduits that were never properly designed for stormwater on either side. And that's where we really came into the problems, is these pipes had failed, and all that stormwater was back charging out of the curb inlets and flowing down the street and causing localized flooding. So the MSD project has new structures that comes all the way down to the existing pipes here and goes up the eastern drive lane. Has 6 curb inlets included along the street, and then reconstruction of a couple curb inlets over here and connecting to this upstream segment. Okay. So what we're asking about is essentially from this area down to where the trailhead is to repave that half of the street. Turn off our street survey So again, you can see the area that we're talking about, half the lane on the west side of the road. And then it's kind of interesting to look back and see, and that's the area in 1937. And then in 1955, there's an offset in the aerial here. You can really see that, you know, Oak Estates, Harvest, Cherry Tree, and a lot of activity was beginning to happen here in those neighborhoods. Any other questions?
Anybody else? Wow, that's very interesting. Really, really interesting. And thank you for taking the time to show us that map. I
You're-
certainly appreciated that, and I think the rest of the council did too. And
Thank
with
you.
that, I will entertain a motion.
Apologize for the typo in the motion.
All
Madam
right.
Mayor, I motion to approve the proposed plan to mill and pave the west lane of Cherry Tree Lane per the on-call paving agreement with
I'll-
STL Milling.
Second.
Can we put the amount not to exceed?
Oh, sure, absolutely, not to exceed four,
23,500.
yeah, yeah.
And,
see,
and I'll just note the nature of our on-call milling and paving agreement, just for recollection, is the asphalt we purchase at the market price on the City of Olivet account, and we have the service part of it included per contract. So it's a $14,000, 500 committed price, and you know, we're estimating the asphalt about $9,000, and of course it's a commodity market that does fluctuate.
So the figure that I would say not to exceed is $23,500.
Yep.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any final thoughts or questions? Hearing none, please poll the council.
Councilmember Weil,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldman,
Yes,
Chairman Clark,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McGregor. It was nice to see you.
You too. Thanks, everybody.
Next item, please.
Item number 10, bill number 2946, an ordinance to adopt a chapter 445 urban agriculture being part of Title IV land use of the Olivet Municipal Code, first reading.
Be bringing Carlos over in 1 second. I'm gonna drop Bruce off.
Uh-oh.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. I just want to first explain kind of what the council has in front of you. And to talk a little bit about why it's in the format, because I don't know how much, there's not really much to, this is a first reading, so there's not going to be necessarily a presentation. But typically what happens with these ordinance changes is it comes from the planning commission to the council, and the council may make an amendment or something to it. The city attorney will determine whether, if they do make an amendment, whether it's substantive or not. And kind of we go from there on to when we do the second reading. In the case of urban agriculture, because of the kind of how big of a topic it is, the council was getting updated on things. And actually the day before, the 2 days or that week of, then the planning commission was giving kind of final approval to recommend this to go to the council. The council had a work session and had talked through it with the city attorney and staff for changes that they would like. So what you have tonight is, because we want to make sure that we follow the process with the Planning Commission. What you have before you is the cover note from the planning director. You have the ordinance, and this, we wouldn't anticipate this changing. And then that Exhibit A is what the Planning Commission has sent forward to you. Okay. And we wanted you to know that that is what the Planning Commission has presented to you. You've seen this before. You saw it that same week. I think there were maybe some minor changes. Then this final document in this scroll was what was amended by the city attorney. What the city attorney amended per the discussion of the council. Paul Martin, Carlos, and I, all spoke on Thursday and again on Friday about this and the process by which we do that, because it is a little unusual. Paul has determined that while the format and maybe the structure is a little different, that there's really nothing substantively different between what the Planning Commission has presented and what the city attorney has determined has put in here. And so I'm gonna kind of, in 1 second, I'm gonna kick it over to Paul, and we're gonna talk about the city attorney ordinance. The other thing then that was included in here were these applications. And I wanted to make clear, because I was brought to my attention, we put these applications in so that you would see the application. But there was a lot of discussion about the subdivisions and this common courtesy, and a memo from the email that Paul sent on Friday was that, we should, these indentures are legally binding, recorded documents, blah, 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 blah. That should be taken out. That sentence should be taken out. And you leave in, your subdivision may have indentures, bylaws, or covenants. And then in that third sentence, please review indentures governing your subdivision. That has been changed on each of the 3 applications. That's the only change on those applications. And I apologize, it should have been made Friday before it went out. But time was kind of getting, we were getting kind of close on time to get this out. So that's kind of what you're looking at. So before we talk about anything on the ordinance, or before we asked for, that Denise has already read it by title the first time. Does that make sense what we're looking at? When you go for a second reading, assuming at the next meeting, you'll only really be looking at this, because then the Planning Commission, what they've sent will be no longer in front of you. Paula, do you want to just make sure I'm?
Sure. I would want to say that, the council has, the requirement under state law is that PCDC review and make a recommendation on land use changes. And this qualifies as a land use change, or at least it's in the land use section of the code. So we want to cover our bases and make sure that we do things in accordance with state law. And there is no requirement under state law that the council vote on exactly what it is that PCDC submits to you. So with the contemporaneous almost council discussion of different issues arising out of this very interesting and complex, sometimes complex subject, There were some changes that the council indicated that they were interested in. And there have been some changes from the version that the amended version. For instance, the amount of feet that we're going to have for setback for apiaries from property lines. And also, the pre-existing bamboo and what to do with that. So there were a lot of structural changes to the ordinance, but the ordinance covers all the same things that we've been talking about, both at PCDC and the council. So what is appropriate, if you are of a mind at some point, and it does not have to be tonight, it can be next week or at the next meeting, but it would be appropriate to amend the ordinance if you believe it's appropriate to substitute exhibit, the second exhibit, I don't know what we called it, exhibit A1, exhibit 1A,
Sure.
whatever we called it.
I called it amended by city attorney.
Okay, to substitute that version for the existing version. And then as the city manager said, that will be the template for your consideration in adopting it for legislation. It seems to make sense to me. And the other thing we wanted to do is we wanted to make sure that there was a clear line of development of the ordinance so that PCDC understood that their recommendation was being submitted and people who have been following it at PCDC could follow it up to this point. And so to make a long story longer, I suppose, it'd be my recommendation that if you believe that the amended version is a product that is more in keeping with how you want this legislation to look, that you go ahead and amend the ordinance by substituting the amended exhibit for the existing exhibit.
Council?
I'm comfortable amending the current making that amendment now. I read the new version and I think it's much closer to what we had discussed. So
Is that a motion? Was that a motion?
yes,
I just haven't heard from everybody. I'd like to kind of hear from everybody.
sure.
I'm fine with what he said as well. I support what Gregory said.
Missy?
I have nothing to say.
I don't know how to interpret that, but okay, I'm going to move on. Maxine?
I'm comfortable. Can I ask, well, finish this part and then I have another question.
Why don't you ask your question and then I'll,
Well, I thought at one point we discussed voting on 3 different pieces and separating some of them out. It's always intended to be one big, okay.
Mhm. Yes.
Ordinance.
Yeah, I don't think we ever said we were going to separate this out. I couldn't even imagine that.
I thought we were going to separate agriculture from like the bees and the chickens.
We discussed it separately, but it was never the intention to separate them as an ordinance. We discussed them simply because the topic, as was said in the beginning, is such a huge topic.
Okay.
It's such a huge topic. It was never anybody's intention to separate them out and vote on them separately. I'm, for me, I'm comfortable if the council's comfortable separating all of this out. I mean, not separating it. I'm sorry. If the council is comfortable with the amended version that the city attorney has crafted, then I'm comfortable amending that now and or at whatever point Paul feels it's appropriate, and then moving forward with that. That doesn't mean, obviously, that we can't have a discussion further on that next time. And for the public's information, we are going to hold a public hearing on it in 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks?
April 13th.
April 13th.
Yes, Mayor, if I may make one more comment in that I'm not suggesting this is the final draft whatsoever. I'm simply suggesting that this better reflects what we discussed in the work session, and we should now make the base for our amendments. That's further amendments, I guess, if there are any. So that is what I'm suggesting.
Thank you for clarifying that. And yes, I think that that is well said. So would everybody like, should we do that now, Paul? Is that what you'd like us to do? Would that simplify it for
I
you?
think, yes, I think that would be fine. I think that would be a good way to go. I do want to tell the council that in rereading it today, there are 4 changes that I think need to be made for clarification purposes, but we will do that in a couple of weeks, and we'll get those to you. And it's just clarification, it's language stuff. But we can also accommodate public comment and further amendments as need be 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, whenever we meet next.
Okay. If you start to remove things, sometimes for me, I'd like to know what has been removed, maybe. So if you redline it, it might, if it doesn't become so convoluted though, sometimes that redlining stuff, it's hard. You have to weave through to read a single word that you've missed.
Well, we'll keep that in mind and try to point out the changes in a clear way. I think they're not going to be significant enough. I think a red line version is going to be able to describe the changes very easily, and I think that'll work.
Okay, that sounds great. So then I just need a motion to accept this amended ordinance.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Oh, sorry. Ryan, so moved. Not coming through.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
You're coming through.
Okay.
I just need a second now.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any final comments or questions? Hearing none, please poll the council.
Councilmember Weil,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldman,
No.
Chairman Clark,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
motion passed.
All right. So this will be taken up again at our April 13th meeting.
So does that mean we'll have another first reading or we'll go straight into a second reading and public hearing?
Second reading and public hearing will be April the 13th.
So will we get a red line sooner than later or before by the workshop?
When Paul does it.
By the
Also,
way,
I wanted to also let the council know I will not be in town April 13th.
Thank you for that.
We'll get something to you. Yes, I'll
we'll
talk
get
with
something to you quickly.
the city attorney because I can't imagine what has changed between Friday and today.
You
That
can
wasn't
always
a
make
good-
it better.
That wasn't a good comment, Paul. I'm just. Good comment.
Just move
All
on.
right. I will, we can move on to the next item.
Item number 11, hearing from citizens, part 2.
Again, if there's anyone that wishes to address the council, kindly raise your hand. Barb will bring you over. Please state your name and address. Keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We are in the middle of election season, so please no electioneering or campaigning. All righty, Leslie would like to come and speak with us.
Leslie, if you, there you go.
Had some technical things to do. This is Greg Evans, and I live at 676 North Price. And I would like to weigh in on the notion of prohibition of bamboo. And I think I would like to make the analogy that this is not unlike other ordinances that control building codes within the city. If you were to adhere to the building codes established in order to create a structure on your property, you would follow standard practices, and those would ensure that the building would be safe and acceptable to all people. So when we have a condition of bamboo on the property and we are instituting regulations to contain its spread, we are actually using something similar to building codes, which is going to keep it from spreading beyond that. However, we don't want to create a situation of prohibition, which would in some way say that the aesthetic of having bamboo is unacceptable. That would be like saying that if you live in a mid-century modern home in Olivet and you have that home, it's fine to live in it, but we're not going to allow anybody else to build a mid-century modern style home in Olivet in the future because we don't like that aesthetic. So I think what we're talking about here in prohibition is not limiting an aesthetic that I find absolutely fantastic. I would have the yard completely designed with bamboo as a part of my landscape. And that's all I'm, saying with regard to the prohibition. I think it's unreasonable. So if the prohibition is for fear of it spreading, then the ordinances that we're using to establish the application and remediation of that are ineffective. So why are we doing that? We have to trust the science that we are employing to stop the spread. Then we can't simply say, okay, we've done that, but we don't like bamboo, so we don't want you to have it anymore. I think that's unreasonable. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address the council? All right, we're going to move on. Next item, please.
Item number 12, review and approval of minutes.
Did anybody see anything that needs to be altered?
I did not review them.
Okay, I didn't see anything that needed to be altered. I will entertain a motion.
Madam Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the city council minutes from the regular meeting of March 9th, 2021, and work session January 5th and 9th, 2021.
Do you have a second?
Second,
Been moved and seconded. Please poll the council.
Councilmember Weil,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldman,
yes.
Chairman Clark,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes,
motion passed.
thank you. Next item, please.
Item number 13, city attorney's report.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a couple of things. Last meeting, we talked about a couple of legislative items. I just wanted to give brief updates on those. The one was the idea of consolidating police departments for cities with less than 5,000 population in St. Louis County with the St. Louis County Department. That amendment is dead. It didn't get voted out of committee. The second one was the proposal to allow for the creation of a new consolidated fire district in St. Louis County, which would mean the consolidation of municipal districts. That I haven't gotten a report on that recently within the last several days, but my understanding from what's his name? Pat
Kelly,
Kelly. From Mr. Kelly is that that particular amendment is doomed. And if
Yeah.
it isn't dead yet, it will be soon.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of anger going on in there because all kinds of
Yes.
shenanigans.
Yeah. I also wanted to let you know that the group of people that I'm with are moving offices, and I'm moving with them, I suppose. We're going to go down to 1400 North Broadway in the city of St. Louis, and I'll get formal changes to my email and addresses for y'all. But just wanted to let you know in case you saw that address and wondered what the heck was going on. And then lastly, I believe that we would like a closed session under section 610.021, 1, 2, and 12, and that is for attorney-client communications, discussions of regarding city property, and discussions regarding contracts negotiated with the city. And that will do it.
Okay. I just have one question for you. Where are we, or have we heard any more about our suit against the state?
I checked that today just to make absolutely sure. The answer is no, we have not heard anything. It's been going on 3 or 4 weeks now. It's not surprising that the judge is taking longer than he initially represented that he might. But no, we haven't heard anything. It's still pending.
Okay. I know you'll tell us as soon as you know, but I'm anxious to know.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I will entertain a motion for closed session. Does
Madam
anyone have anything? Bye,
Madam-
Carl.
I make a motion that we move into closed session pursuant to the sections articulated by the city attorney.
610-021, 1, 2, and 12.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Please poll the council.
Councilmember Weil,
Yes.
Councilmember Carl,
Yes.
Councilmember Waldman,
Yes.
Chairman Clark,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending the council meeting. The council is going to adjourn to closed session. I don't expect to have anything to report when we come back. The city council has returned from closed session. We have no report to give. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Thank you, council. I will see all of you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thanks,
That would be
everybody.
nice.
Good night.
Paul.
Good night, everybody. Barb,
Thank you.